This past Thursday, in the midst of another chaotic week full of high holidays preparations, the beginning of school transitions, and pretty sick kids, what else is new? I found myself on a drive that I know too well, to Colma, to the Home of Peace Cemetery. David once commented as I drove and he sat in the passenger seat that he has never seen me navigate a route so well. I don't drive very much. But this drive to Home of Peace, where Beth Sholom has a section, I know a little too well. And I have to admit, despite the circumstances for the drive, I tend to enjoy it. Usually alone, I play contemplative Jewish music, and as any parent of small kids would agree, car time alone is a precious gift. Anyway, this past Thursday, I was not driving to the cemetery for a funeral. I was driving there because last year, sometime around 3 a.m. on one of those sleepless nights between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I created a Google Doc called Ideas for 5783. And on it, I typed, Community Cemetery Visit between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Kever Avot. Visiting the gravesite of our loved ones is a custom in our tradition, and particularly during the 10 days of awe. And I was interested to see if we could try this as a community. I arrived at Home of Peace 15 minutes early. The grounds workers were gracious enough to set up 10 chairs in the Beth Sholom section of the cemetery. It was a beautiful, sunny day, hot even. I arranged the chairs in a circle and I sat. And as the minutes passed, slowly trickled in 1, 2, 6, 13 members of our community to gather and visit with their loved ones during these 10 days of repentance. I began by blowing the shofar to symbolize the season, and I framed this reborn ritual as a time to connect with our loved ones when we ourselves are at a transition moment of the year. I asked, what memories are you holding of them? And how can those memories influence you in the coming year? I invited each person to share who they were there to remember. There were laughs and there were tears, just as you might expect. There were nods and smiles when someone brought up a loved one who the rest of the group remembered well. There were heavy sighs of disappointment when someone brought up a tragic loss or a person taken too soon. The gathering was really lovely. It was meaningful and sad and joyful and nostalgic, all wrapped up in one. I felt a deep connection to a part of this community that I had not connected with much before, to those who came before me. Just last week at our Erev Rosh Hashanah community dinner, a longtime and beloved congregant expressed a bit of sadness in coming to the dinner because their Erev Rosh Hashanah dinner that had always been hosted by her close friends was no longer. People were getting older, traditions were shifting, but she also noted the joy of new traditions and the appreciation that she felt for being able to have dinner cooked with love in our Beth Sholom kitchen and surrounded by this community. As I drove away from the cemetery, I was flooded with thoughts and memories and emotions. It was like I had planted myself in front of a slideshow on a projector and was watching, slide by slide, all of the things that people are holding in their lives in this room, all that you have experienced over the past year, and all that I get to be a part of as your rabbi. I thought about all of the ufrufs and weddings in the past year, births and baby namings, birthdays and b'nai mitzvah. I thought about welcoming new members into this community and seeing the plaza packed with people anytime we mention that Marlene will feed us. I thought about the bedsides that I have sat at in the last year, people who I sang to in their final moments and who are no longer with us today. I saw myself standing at open grave sites and watching the community fill the dirt to the top, a tradition started by Rabbi Lou. I thought about people who we love who are sick in this community, who we hold in so many ways. I thought about people who have, thank God, come through an illness or life-threatening experience. And I thought about the people whose names you say in the Misha Berach, praying for their healing in whatever form that might take. I thought about sitting around the Kiddush table in Koret Hall with top-notch whiskey, teaching and rejoicing in the words of Birkat Hamazon. I thought about board meetings and committee meetings and staff meetings and the mundane day-to-day that make this place run. And at 2 p.m. on Thursday, as I drove away from the cemetery, I admit that up to that moment, I had written and deleted and written and deleted. Nothing for tonight felt quite right. But as I drove away from the cemetery, I had utter clarity. Ve'elu devarim she'en lahem shi'or. These are the things that have no measure. Better understood, these are the things that we can do that cannot be quantified and which we do not expect anything in return. And the world will pull you in every which way. But what I realized, and I wanted to tell you tonight, as we prepare to strike or gently tap our chests and ready ourselves to ask for forgiveness, that aside from your family, there is maybe nothing else in your life as important as your Jewish community. Communities are built on values, and we are taught in our tradition, in the ethical teachings of our fathers, Pirkei Avot, that the world stands on 3 things: Torah, Avodah, and Gimilut Chasadim. Torah, acts of service, and loving kindness. I believe our Jewish community is also built on account of 3 additional things: the individual, the communal, and the greater infrastructure needed to hold those communal and individual needs. And as an individual, we are not only showing up, but we have certain commitments. We should feel a sense of obligation. Maimonides, who wrote in the Mishnah Torah, a collection of Jewish law, teaches the following: Mitzvah aseh shel divrehem. It is a positive commandment of rabbinic origin to visit the sick, to comfort mourners, to prepare for a funeral, prepare a bride, welcome or show hospitality to guests, attend to all the financial needs of burial, carry a corpse on one's shoulders, escort the casket, eulogize, dig a grave, and bury the dead, and also to bring joy to a bride and groom and help them in all of their needs. Ve'elu hen gimilut chasadim shebegufo she'en lahem shi'or. These things are deeds of kindness that one carries out and that have no measure. There is no limit and there is no way to quantify them. And although all these mitzvot are of rabbinic origin, written by rabbis and not in the Torah, Maimonides makes the claim that this is what the Torah meant in the Torah commandment, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. Whatever you would like other people to do for you, you should do for others. What Maimonides does here is he takes this verse, love your neighbor as yourself, and he asks himself, and he asks us to ask ourselves, how does one put this into action? Kindness? Yes. Treating others with respect? Of course. But remember that Maimonides is writing a code of Jewish law. His point is that we should be making commitments in Jewish life not out of love or friendship, not out of guilt or even minchag, tradition, but precisely because you are obligated, and in most cases, you know that you will not be repaid for the particular act of kindness. He lists financial obligations, emotional investments, and even physical labor. He uses the moments in people's lives, particularly weddings and funerals, as a catalyst for a mitzvah. And not mitzvah as good deed, but as an obligation. There are some in this community who take that obligation extremely seriously. A handful who I know will be at the funeral or the shiva, sometimes before I even arrive. You know who you are, and thank you. For those of you who have chosen to be members of Beth Sholom, you probably noticed that when you were filling out your membership forms this year, there was not only a financial commitment, but a community commitment as well. I can organize a meal for someone in a time of need. Call me if you are short and need a minyan. I will show up to a shiva house of someone I don't know. Pair me with a new member to help them meet others in the community. Pair me with a conversion student to be a guide during services. I have a skill I can offer or teach in the community. I have a professional skill to offer on a committee. For those of you who added your names to different initiatives, thank you. And this is my promise to you that we will follow up and bring that commitment to action. And I want to also be really honest. There are areas in this community where we have struggled. We continue to have a hard time filling slots for meals for families with new babies, an initiative that we are really proud of. We've had a hard time finding greeters for our Shabbat services, and I hate the thought of a new person or anyone walking into our courtyard and not being welcomed here. And I'm sad to say that there has been more than one instance over the last year where I have found myself in the home of a mourner, unsure if we will make a minyan for that mourner to say Kaddish. That is a failure on us as a community and on me as a leader. And for that, I am sorry, and I hope that we can all do better this coming year. And I invite you to join me in committing or recommitting to one or two of those ways that will strengthen this community. Elu devarim she'ein lahem shi'or. Those things that aren't for myself, but for the greater good of another person or the community. Finally, in order to sustain ourselves as a piece of the larger community puzzle, the Talmud took into account what exactly was needed to build a successful and sustainable community. In the Talmud Sanhedrin, we are taught that a sage or a religious leader is not permitted to reside in a city that does not have 10 things. 1, a Beit Din or a court. 2, a kupa shel tzedakah, a charity fund. 3, a synagogue. 4, a mikveh, ritual bathhouse. 5, a public bathroom. 6, a doctor. 7, a bloodletter. 8, a scribe. 9, a shochet or ritual slaughterer. And 10, melamed tinokot, a teacher of young children. Most notable in this text is that we know that not everyone will use or take advantage of all of those places, and just like each of those pieces makes for a sustainable community, so too do each of you play a role in sustaining this community. I gave a teaching just yesterday on Shabbat Shuvah about what happens right after the end of Yom Kippur. The first thing that we do after the shofar blasts and after Havdalah, before we even break the fast, is that we daven Mariv. The central part of Mariv, the evening service, is the Amidah, and the Amidah, which during the weekday contains 18 blessings, includes this one. Slach lanu avinu, ki chatanu. Forgive us, our Father, for we have sinned. Machalanu malkenu ki pashanu. Pardon us, malkenu, for we have transgressed. For your nature is to forgive and pardon. Rabbi Joel Seltzer asks about these words. After 25 hours of fasting and striking our chest and asking for forgiveness, is it really necessary to do it again? Right then, have we even had enough time to commit a sin in the last 30 seconds between Havdalah and this Amidah? The answer is no, maybe not. But soon enough, we will. Soon enough, we will make a mistake. We will have a bad thought about another person or say something that we didn't mean because we are human. But when we return to this spot next year, and God willing, we all will, I want each of us to feel like we have made a difference differently than this past year. Think about those pieces of community where you add your voice, where you roll up your sleeves. Be a Jew in the count of 10. Not one of us can do it alone, but imagine what this community could look like if we each really did our part. We have done the work to get from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, and what will we have to show for ourselves between Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah? As I drove to the cemetery on Thursday, I sort of joked to myself that maybe the departed souls would have some words of wisdom that I would be able to carry with me into this Yom Kippur. And coming off of that experience, I was inspired to reopen a book of sermons by Rabbi Lew called Lehitraot that was compiled by this community at the time that Rabbi Lew retired, and that was lent to me by Bruce Medoff and Miriam Gordon on one of my weekends during my internship here. Apologies for never returning the book. Rabbi Lew wrote a sermon in 5765, 2004, called, What is a Synagogue? He writes, to paraphrase Rabbi Nachman, the whole world is a very narrow alley. and we are standing at the top of the alley looking down. And down at the bottom, I can see Saul White. I can see Israel Reich. I can see Sarah and David Levinson, Joe Meyer and Ernie Whites. I can see Abe Bernstein and Adina Sharon, Buddy and Stephen Pearl. I can see hundreds of faces pressed to the glass, and they are looking up at us with a mixture of heartbreaking, compassion, and concern. And to extend the words of our beloved rabbi, I can see him, Rabbi Lou, who I did not know, but who I continue to learn from every day. I can see those who I had the blessing of knowing, Saul Silver and Yitzchak, Catherine Hollander, Itzi Rothstein, and Helen Adler. I can see Marvin Pfeffer, Trudy Meyer, Hannah Orner, and Nancy Lipsitz, each of them proudly looking down upon our congregation as we continue to build and strengthen ourselves into the future. Elu divarim she'en lahem shi'or. Like so many who have come before us, may we each use our time on this earth to fulfill our obligations without any expectation of anything in return, to ourselves, to this community, and to those whose lives you will change without ever even knowing it. And may each of us be inscribed in the book of life. Gamar Chatima Tova.